It's the Go Gopher Podcast with Mike Grimm, episode number 141. I am Mike Grimm, voice of the Golden Gophers, and welcome back to the podcast. We're talking baseball this week, and it's our pleasure to welcome for the first time to the Go Gopher Podcast with Mike Grimm, one of the all-time great former Gopher baseball players, a former Twins All-Star, and current TV and radio broadcaster for the Twins. Minnesota native Glen Perkins will recap the disappointing Twins season. He'll look back at his time as a Gopher, talk about the great John Anderson, and the new direction of Gopher baseball and college baseball in general. We're thrilled that Glen Perkins will join us today. Our Go Gopher Podcast is presented by alumni-owned Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. If you're a business founder planning to exit your business, start by contacting Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. Sunbelt serves more businesses up to $5 million in revenue than anyone, and True North M&A serves companies with revenues up to $150 million. Get a confidential, no-cost, no-obligation business valuation started today. Hey, make the most of your life's work. Visit sunbeltminnesota.com or tnma.com today. Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union is also a big sponsor of the Go Gopher Podcast with Mike Grimm. Life math is complicated, and Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union makes it easier with local financial experts available to help in person or virtually. Go to affinityplus.com/Go Gophers for more info. Longtime Gopher sports supporter Cub is also sponsoring our Go Gopher Podcast. In a hurry? Don't worry, Cub delivers. Get fresh meat, produce, everyday essentials, and more delivered to your door. Cub is the official grocer of the Golden Gophers and proud to support Gopher athletics for over 20 years. We're podcasting episode 141 from the Aquarius Home Services studio. We invite you to subscribe to the Go Gopher Podcast. It's free to do so. You can go back and listen to previous Go Gopher podcasts. For example, last week, we had an outstanding visit with Gopher women's hockey coach Brad Frost, previewing their season, which is now 2 games old, and the second-ranked Gophers are 2-0. This week, we're talking baseball, Twins, Gophers, and college baseball with former Golden Gopher star lefty Glen Perkins, who joins me next.
I'm Clay Geary, walk-on turned scholarship wide receiver for Gopher football.
And I'm Ben Utek, U of M alumni, Super Bowl champion, and Tony Dungy Uncommon Award winner.
We understand championship culture, which is why we're part of the True North family of companies.
True North invests in only elite teams, like the champion team at Sunbelt Business Advisors, Minnesota's largest seller of companies. To learn more about True North and our diverse family of independently owned companies, visit TrueNorthEquityPartners.com.
When we say that Cub milk is the freshest in town, we mean it. Less than 48 hours from farm to store fresh. We guarantee 7 days or more of freshness. It all starts with local dairy farmers who take great care in making sure all the cows are happy and healthy. We support local farm families 365 days a year. And that makes our milk even more delicious. So you always get the freshest milk and the biggest smiles.
It's episode 141, the Go Gopher Podcast, and we're going to talk some baseball here, professional and college ball. And who better to talk about it, making his first appearance on the Go Gopher Podcast, one of the all-time great Gopher pitchers, Glen Perkins. Glen, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
I'm good, Mike. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about. I definitely, we've got John Anderson's retirement to talk about. I know you guys are tight and close, and new coach and the changing landscape of college athletics, all of that. But I think for the moment, most people that listen here and watch and pay attention to baseball are mostly familiar with your work, first as an all-star Twins lefty reliever, and secondly now as a broadcaster who does both TV and radio and pregame and postgame shows on TV, depending on what your assignment is from our guy Drew, right? Whatever Drew says you have to do. Let me ask you, what the heck happened with the Minnesota Twins there that final 6 weeks?
You know what? It was such a weird season from start to finish. And I want to say it was April 22nd. They were 7-13. They had a 103-game stretch where they were the best team in baseball. But I don't think anybody would say or realize or believe that they were the best team in baseball. They never played like it. They never looked like it. They had the one long winning streak coming out of that bad start. And outside of that, it was kind of just consistent winning 2 out of 3, 3 out of 5. They never really looked good. And I don't think anybody expected the collapse that we saw. but you knew that the way that they were winning almost didn't feel sustainable. And the whole season, I had this pit in my stomach that it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel like a team that should have a 70-53 record, which they had, I want to say, on August 17th.
Right.
Nobody could have predicted that. I thought, you know what, if they can run the rest of this season 500, they're going to be about a 90-win team. And it seemed a foregone conclusion that they were going to get in. But they stopped pitching. They stopped getting innings out of their rotation, and they stopped hitting. And I mean, obviously, those are the keys. I don't think anybody realized how big of a loss Joe Ryan was going to be, because they had the prospects, because they have Pablo Lopez. Bailey Ober was having a great year, but losing Joe, I think, obviously Carlos was down, Buck was down, but when you start leaking innings and you're giving innings to guys that maybe aren't ready to pitch in the big leagues, you run into problems. And they quickly ran out of gas and just couldn't get any traction. And it was certainly shocking. I figured, like I said, they'd maybe go 500 down the stretch, and that was going to be enough to get them in. I didn't see them going 12-27 to finish the year.
Yeah, same. As I was watching you guys call the game, you and Corey, or listening with you and Chris, either way, it seemed that I agree with you. I thought the same. It was almost like they were piecing it together, MacGyvering it through much of that great stretch where they were the best team in baseball. You never felt like, well, this team's just this relentless juggernaut that's going to roll. Right. So you had to tip your cap, right? That, hey, they're figuring out ways to win. But man, you throw three rookies all of a sudden in that starting rotation, and that changes stuff.
Well, and that's the thing is that you can get by for a certain amount of time with pieces that aren't ready, with pieces that don't exactly fit. Anything can happen in baseball on any given day, and it's unique in sports. I think baseball is that over the course of time you're going to get exposed. The season is just too long, and they just, like I said, they ran out of gas, and it's not all at once, but it's an accumulation over time of missing their big bats. Royce Lewis struggled in the second half. He ran out of gas. They didn't have Buck. They didn't have Prey, like I said. So there's other guys that can step up for a time. And I think baseball too, the more success you have, the more other teams are going to focus on finding ways to get you out, to hit you, to have success against you and focus on you. And then you're individually going to get exposed as well as the team. And those kind of things happen. It's amazing how quickly Major League Baseball players make adjustments. And I think that the experience that David Festa got, that Zebby Matthews got, it's going to be valuable in the future. The downside is this wasn't the season that they needed to expose those guys to the big leagues. And you want the team that they had assembled to have a chance, because I do think that they did, but they just had too many guys get hurt. They had too many guys run out of gas late, and it wasn't a sustainable situation. It wasn't a sustainable operation that they had running. And we saw that in September.
Yeah, for sure. And I wasn't as frustrated maybe as some fans, because my theory was always, at this point, you just got to make the tournament. And then, heck, if all of a sudden Buxton and Correa and whoever, Miranda gets hot, and you've got Bailey Ober and Pablo Lopez, all of a sudden you could potentially make a run. I mean, a year ago at this time, 1 year ago today, did anybody have the Rangers and Diamondbacks in the World Series, right? Nobody. Not one person.
So I was just going to say, the Twins saw the Diamondbacks last year, early August, swept them at Target Field. They saw the Rangers 7 out of 10 late. It was late August, early September. They won 9 out of 10.
Yeah, crazy.
They swept them at Target Field. They won 3 out of 4 down in Texas. Neither of those teams looked like a team. The Diamondbacks certainly didn't look like a playoff team. The Rangers weren't healthy. And even in August, I did have that feeling of like, this feels Rangers-ish, where they're not playing well, but they're not healthy. And if they can just keep their head above water and get healthy, maybe they've got a chance. But whether they ran out of time, like I said, I think that the biggest loss was Joe Ryan.
Yeah,
I really do. You can focus on Correa, you can focus on Buck, because they're the highest paid guys. They're the guys that are in the middle of the lineup. They're the superstars. but you have 162 games of 9 innings. You have so many innings that you have to cover. And not only did you lose Joe's innings, you lost really quality innings. And that's where everything, the pressure mounts, and you see bullpen guys struggle in situations where they don't normally because they're throwing too much, because there's guys that are in situations they shouldn't be in because of the amount of innings they're going to have to cover. And then the offense feels like they need to pick up because, we got to score more runs because we don't have these guys. We don't have Joe throwing every 5th day. And so we have to do more. And then the bullpen thinks, now we have to do more. The game is 2-1 when it could have been 4-1. The game is 4-4 when it should have been 4-1, whatever. And so you start, it's not a battle between the two, but there certainly gets to be this, like, we need to pick them up and they need to pick us up. And that can be dangerous. Yeah. And we saw some of that where Griffin Jackson had an unbelievable season. He really struggled in September, and you could almost see him trying harder and harder every time he went out to get it done. And baseball is the ultimate try easy game. The harder you try, the worse you're going to do.
100%.
The easier you try, the better you're going to do.
Yeah, no question. Jax, I have a Twins jersey, but I haven't, like, if I would spend my hard-earned money on a personalized, I'm going to be a Rube and go get, I would buy a Griffin Jax jersey tomorrow. He's my guy. I just loved watching him pitch. He was a competitor. He just had a great moxie to him. And even the times it seemed that he did have some struggles, it usually was like this little dinker or a dunk or something. He never really got pelted at any point. I love that guy.
His stuff is too good for him to get beat.
Yeah.
The way that he did in September. I look at him and think I would have killed to have the stuff that he has. And I had a great career, but that dude, he's a guy, man. He really is. I probably talk with Griff more than any other guy on that team. Very smart. One of the hardest workers that I've been around. And, he's going to do some really great things. I know he wants to get another crack in the rotation, and it's going to kill me if they give it to him. I want him in the bullpen for however long he can be a Twin. And I think he's an absolute stud. And he's just disgusting.
It's unbelievable the stuff he has. He can bring it, and he's gotten better too. I even recall once they put you in the bullpen, right? You gained some velocity. You zeroed in on some different things, and I wonder if Jax didn't benefit from maybe some similar things that you did to. I'm not going to say turn your career around, but really take off, right?
No, and it's fair. And it was the same with him. He struggled as a starter. Cole Sands struggled as a starter. Guys get put in the bullpen, and you get to just go out there and air it out. You're not thinking about 100 pitches, 5 innings, 6 innings, whatever it is. You get to just go out there and let it fly. And his stuff plays at 98 with the fastball and then 87 with the sweeper. And he's throwing like a low 90s changeup now too. Like those things, those pitches play at that velocity. It's a lot more difficult when you're 3 miles an hour slower, 4 miles an hour slower. Things get a lot more difficult. Command becomes more important, all of those things. And I just think that there's guys, if you have success in the pen, just stay there. I want to see him put Louis in the pen as well. I think he's another guy, even just mentality-wise. I think that those guys have the mentality to be relievers, and that matters. There's guys that have the long-term mentality that can be starters. There's guys that have that kind of, I'm going to go out there in a short burst, I'm going to punch you in the mouth, and I'm going to get out of there. And I think that's Louis. We look at what Louis does out of the pen. We look at what Griff does out of the pen, and then look at their numbers as starters. It's not a fluke. And I think that it's stuff ticks up, but I also just think the way that their brains work, they're bullpen guys, they're relievers, and you can make a ton of money being a really good reliever, just as well as you can make a ton of money being an average starter. I would rather be a good reliever going to all-star games and closing out games at Target Field than I would be a middle of the rotation starter. It's a heck of a lot more fun to come out of that pen to music and fans cheering than it is trying to slog through a start on a Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah. Is there some, liberation too in that, where you're not bogged down with a long game plan or a long play, where you're just, the guy hands you the ball and says, get 3 guys. That's it. That's your job tonight, is to get 3 outs, however you can get them, do whatever you need to do. And I would think that there's some liberation to that role.
There is, and the adrenaline, the intensity, all of those things, and there truly is. I've done them. I did everything in baseball, and I had great starts. I had terrible starts. I had great relief appearances and terrible relief appearances. There's nothing better than going out there and blowing guys' doors off and making hitters look stupid, and feeding off of that. And that's why I say the mentality that was the mentality that I had. I came to a realization at some point in my career that, like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have to try to focus for 6 innings. I want to focus on 3 hitters. I want to focus on 1 inning. I don't care if it's the 7th, 8th, 9th inning, whenever it is. I want to minimize my focus. I want to narrow it as much as I can and go out there and make hitters look as dumb as possible and get off the field.
And is it too something with that where you kind of are an everyday player in that role too, where if you're a starter, you throw, you build up 4 days, and now you're ready to go again, and there's a lot of pressure there. Not just obviously closing there's pressure because you give up a homer and everyone wants to run you out of town, and you do it 2 nights in a row, and then it's, oh my God, what's going on? That said, you come to the ballpark most every day. There may be 3 times a month where you're out because you've pitched 2 days in a row or what have you, but being an everyday player as a pitcher is a unique role too.
You just flip the roles. You're part of the team once every 5 days when you're a starter. The other 4 days, you're just there as a spectator. You're getting your work in, you're throwing your bullpen, doing your running, you're lifting, all those things, but you're just a spectator. You're not going to factor in. And then you come out of the bullpen, and nowadays they really don't even throw 3 days in a row. Certainly aren't throwing 4 days in a row. I only did that once. But you felt like you earned an off day. If you go out there and you throw 3 days in a row, you can show up that 4th day knowing, hey, I'm down. I'm going to get in the hot tub. I'm going to do some work. I'm going to get in the training room and get some treatment, and then just go watch a baseball game and then get back on the horse. And then the other thing is, as a starter, you have a bad start. You let the team down, and now you get to stew on it for 4 days until you get to go back out there and prove yourself again. And if you give up a home run out of the bullpen, you get to come back the next day and have another outing. You got a chance again the very next day. So you get to shorten that bad feeling. And all of those things were things that I loved about being a reliever. And yes, you are much more of an everyday player when you're coming out of the bullpen. And I love the feeling of the team is trying to get me the ball. This whole thing, we're going to play 8 innings, and the goal is get the ball to the guy in the 9th. There's no better feeling than that.
Yeah. You think about it next year, if you have Sands back, you've got Jack he stays in the bullpen. Let's say they talk Louis into throwing, because the guy's throwing 99, and he's been really good in that role. And then you've got Duran as well, and Jax could be the closer. You make your pick. That's a pretty good group. You add a lefty in there, and there's others I'm forgetting, but this has a potential to be a pretty darn good bullpen for 2025.
And the bullpen is only going to be as good as the starting rotation is and the innings that they can get out of the starting rotation. And that's what we saw this year is those guys, they end up getting wore down. But you need bulk. It's not, the Royals 10 years ago had the 3-headed monster with Herrera and Davis and Greg Holland. But you've got to have more than that. And they do have the pieces. They really do. And I think that with what Zebby did, with what David Festa did this year, those guys, Festa for sure, I think is going to be a guy next year that probably is in the rotation out of spring training. I would have him in the rotation out of spring training. Yep. What he did, really take away his first 2 starts when he came up Arizona, the next one back at home. He got sent down. When he came back up, he was honestly one of the better pitchers in the American League. And so I think he's all but established himself as an option for next year. Yeah. He made it all the way through the season. So that maybe gives them a little bit more comfort in moving Louis out of that spot. They have Sim, they have Zebby. One of those 2 guys, you'd like to be the odd man out. You want, maybe even if you can have both of those guys in AAA, that's your 6 and 7. But putting Louis in that pen certainly changes the dynamic of how often and where in the game you use Jax, where you use Duran. They're gonna have some options down there, but they're gonna need to stay healthy, just like any season. Stay healthy in the rotation. That bullpen, there's enough guys that you can look at that and be like, they've got some pieces in place to have a really good pitching staff. And for the bulk of this year, they were a really good pitching staff. They had a top 3 strikeout rate and a bottom 3 walk rate in the sense of few walks. They gave up too many home runs, which I think is something that they've got to figure out. But from the analytic perspective, they did everything that you wanted to do from a pitching staff as a whole. And now they've got guys with experience, and I think that bullpen can be a little bit better. Put Louis in there. Brock Stewart, who knows if he's going to be healthy, if he's going to be around, what the deal is there. But if Louis can take that spot, they are in a really good position pitching wise.
Yeah, no doubt. Do you think they have to? I mean, I know payroll is an issue and we don't know yet. And I know they said they won't cut, and we don't have to go down that rabbit hole because we could probably spend another hour on a podcast on that part of it alone. And I know people are frustrated, and I think it's understandable. I'm certainly not here to defend anybody, but by the same token, the two teams that finished ahead of them have less payroll than even the Twins, right? So, I mean, there's also the flip side to that. That said, all that, can they go sign another pitcher? Do you think they need to? What do you think? A starter, I'm talking now.
I mean, I think in an ideal world, yeah, they would have one more guy, but you can run through. I mean, so the thing with the money, Pablo's getting a big raise this year. Bailey Ober is he's going to arbitration. Joe Ryan's going to arbitration. It's not a ton of money, but Joe's going to be probably one of the three highest paid first-year ARB guys. He's got first-year ARB is all about bulk, and Joe's got a ton of bulk. Bailey's got a ton of bulk. So those guys are going to get a raise. Pablo's going from, I want to say, under 10 to over 20 next year. So there's a big raise there. Kepler's out of the mix, so that's probably Pablo's raise. They're going to have some money to spend. Is it best to spend it on one guy in a rotation? I don't know. Yeah. I think that if you have that money, it's trying to find depth pieces. I think Carlos Santana was a great signing this year. Last year, it was Michael A. Taylor. Those kind of guys, it's adding depth. And they have more guys coming through the minor leagues. There's prospects down there. Luke Keeschel is one. They have more pitching coming through. I think we're finally starting to see the fruits of Derek Falvey and the pitching development factory. It's been a long time, but guys are starting to come, and it seems like they have a guy or guys at every level that will be able to backfill. So I've never loved the idea of signing starting pitchers. I just haven't. I feel like you make trades, you sign guys to extensions, you like they did with Pablo. I think that's a better bet long term than trying to sign some guy to appease a fan base. I really don't think that's it.
Yeah.
If you're going to sign guys, it's position players. It's a Carlos Correa type, and then it's depth pieces. This team didn't lose because their stars didn't play well. They didn't have enough depth. And that's where the payroll came into play. That's where dropping 20 or 30 million or whatever it was, that's all depth pieces that they just weren't able to either sign this last offseason or add at the deadline. And those are the things that I think that those are, for me, that's where that money should go. I think they have the pitching. And I would hate to see them spend it on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that for sure. Let me quickly mention a sponsor here of the podcast. It's Affinity Plus. They are your local credit union, proudly serving Minnesota since 1930. As a current Gopher student or a proud Gopher alum, you're eligible to join this financial that wants to build a meaningful banking relationship and put you first. You can meet with a local employee at any of their branches statewide, including one right near campus in Minneapolis. To learn more and find other ways to connect, visit affinityplus.org/Go Gophers. That's affinityplus.org/Go Gophers. Affinity Plus, Federal Credit Union, federally insured by NCUA, people-centered banking, perfect for Gophers. And we have a Gopher on with us. Glen Perkins was a great Golden Gopher pitcher. We've been talking Twins because their season just ended on Sunday, and a little bit of a disappointing fizzle to that season. And we'll talk some Gopher baseball now with Perk. And, you were talking about closing and the role that you served. I got to think, and this is still a little Twins related, certainly, that as a guy who grew up in Stillwater, was a Gopher, when the Minnesota Twins hosted the All-Star game and you threw the final pitch of that with the American League winning, how cool was that?
I think that the series of events that led me to being on that field are just truly amazing. I remember early in my career having a conversation with my wife about starting and relieving. She wasn't familiar with the game, and she knew who Joe Nathan was, and was like, "Well, are you ever going to do what Joe does?" No, I'm going to be a starter. I'm a starter. I was drafted as a starter. I'm going to be a starter forever. to end up in the bullpen, I was at a crossroads in my career in 2010, 2011 in that stretch. And that was, are you a starter? Are you a reliever? They put me in the pen. At no point then did I ever think I was even going to close games, let alone pitch in an all-star game. So to have my career peak at the same time that the Twins were going to host the World Series, like that series of events, the all-star game, that series of events is just impossible to quantify. And so I always say that the one thing that I'm happy about with that whole situation was that I knew I had the wherewithal and the awareness to know what was happening. And so often throughout your career, you just go through the motions. In baseball, you get so wrapped up in a routine and just plodding along and doing the same things every day and like living with that monotony. And so you don't appreciate moments because everything just blends, a season blends together. But I knew in that moment that we were, as an organization, were struggling. And so I knew that the playoffs at the World Series probably wasn't a reality. And so I knew in that moment, this is going to be the highlight of my career. And there was a really good chance it was going to be the highlight of my career. So I soaked everything in. I just enjoyed the crap out of it. And I remember running on the field in the ninth inning at Target Field thinking all of these people are cheering because they know that their guy is running onto the field to close out the game. And I got to the mound. Kurt Suzuki came into the game to catch. And I said to him, we had this routine. I would come into a game and he would say, we're going to go 1-3 wiggle. So that was fastball, slider, and then a wiggle would be a sinker. If I had a lefty, I was going to throw a sinker in. And then he would say second sign, shake first. So if there was a guy on second, he would give me a second. It would be multiple signs. The second sign would be what I would throw. If I shook, then he'd put down multiple signs. It would be the first sign. That was how simple signs were back in the day.
Pre-earpiece, yeah.
Yeah. And so I get to the mound. Kurt comes out there, and I said, can you effing believe this? Because the place was going nuts. And I knew that they were cheering for us. We were standing on the mound. There's two Twins at Target Field. And he looks at me, and he goes, 1-3 wiggle, second sign, shake first, and turn around and ran away. And I was like, come on, dude. Like, we're in the All-Star game. Like, take this in. Like, I wanted to stand on the mound and, like, look around. Like I wanted to, like, stand there with him, like, put my arm around his shoulder and, like, look around at the field right now, dude. Like, we're on the freaking mound at Target Field in the All-Star game. He ran away. I did it. I was like, this is crazy. Like, what am I doing out here? How did I end up here? Never in a million years would I have thought that I was going to be out there. So it was it was unbelievable. It really was. I can't believe that it's over 10 years now. Like it truly feels like yesterday. And but yeah, I mean, what a moment. It did end up being the highlight of my career.
Yeah.
It was awesome. And certainly a moment that I will never forget.
All right. I'll put you on the spot. Who were the batters you retired?
Oh, gosh. Josh Harrison, I struck out. I want to say Miguel Montero flew out, and then maybe Charlie Blackmon grounded out to second.
Gotcha.
In some order.
I don't know the answer. I was just asking.
Oh, I think it was fly out, strikeout, ground out to second on a bad slider that Charlie rolled over. I believe that was the sequence.
Amazing.
10 years ago.
Yeah, a long time ago.
I was just thinking about me and Kurt. It didn't matter. I wanted to get a strikeout.
Yeah.
And I got that Josh Harrison slider in the dirt. It just insane. Absolutely insane.
Let's talk some Gophers now. John Anderson announced prior to last season that this past year would be his last, talking about 23-24. I know you and John are good friends. I know you like what he did. I mean, all-time legend 14 we're talking about here. What were your thoughts when you heard? And kind of take me through, John was just honored at the Iowa football game. He got a huge standing ovation when the Gopher football team was there. And he's been on this podcast many times. He's one of our favorites, but what a guy. And it is nice that, he's able to hear people tell him how great he is, right?
Yeah, I think that nobody has done more for the sport of baseball in Minnesota than him on the amateur side. No question about it. He built a program that kids in Minnesota grew up wanting to be a part of. It was my dream all the way through middle school, high school. I wanted to be a Gopher. And I didn't know who John Anderson was at the time. I didn't know Rob Fornestier. I didn't know Todd Oakes. I didn't know any of those guys. But I knew that I wanted to play for the Gophers. And that was everybody's goal that I played with, that I played against. You wanted to be a D1 player. You wanted to be a Minnesota Gopher. And that was him. That was his program. That was his culture. And I think the most unique thing about it was, when I was there, I realized how special the program was with the alumni game that we would play, and all of the former professional baseball players, Major League Baseball players that would come back for that, and guys that didn't live in Minnesota anymore, but they would come back and play in a game before spring training. They would want to be there because of John. That was because of him. So he created this culture of guys wanting to be a part of it past the time that they were part of the team, that they were part of the university. And I was certainly in that camp. I went back every winter. That's where I worked out. That's where I threw. I did all of my off-season training back there with a bunch of other guys that played pro baseball. And that was as important to him as what happened on the field. But I think what would happen is we would be there. So when I was a Gopher, I'm there in the off-season watching professional baseball players work out, thinking, I want to be one of those guys. I want to be a guy that comes back and gets to work out in a whatever professional, whatever Major League Baseball organization's gear. You know, those guys would show up with, I remember seeing Rob Quinlan wearing Angel stuff, thinking, I want to be Rob Quinlan. And so it was never a question of, when I got done, like, I'm not going to go to Florida and get ready. I'm coming back. We have this field house. He is welcoming. I spent more time and learned more from all of those guys after I got done playing than I did when I played there. I feel like John was much more of a father figure and a mentor to me after I got done playing. And it's just a testament to his personality, to his work ethic, and the way he operated, that it was a family. It truly was a family. And he built something really special in a place that is incredibly difficult to produce quality baseball.
Yeah, and you talk about now the fact that he's handed the keys over to Ty McDevitt, who's a young guy. We had Ty on the podcast after he got hired, and I with some trepidation went in and made the comparison. It was a little bit like when John got the job at 26, right? I mean, back then they just basically said, "Here, you're the assistant. Go ahead and build a program, or continue to build a program," because of course, Coach Siebert had such a great success prior to that, and so now this enormous responsibility falls to Ty McDevitt. You and I were talking before the podcast came on, and you mentioned that he was into some instructional work where he had an academy and different things while he was even a player at the Gophers. I can tell you this: he was, even as a high schooler, his family owned the Cages group. And my son coming through, he played at Lakeville North. When my son was 10, 11, 12 years old, 17 and 18-year-old Ty McDevitt was teaching him how to catch, right? So now, all these years later, Ty, when I see him, will ask how Jacob's doing, and I'll say, well, he's doing fine, and he still has in his mind he's a 12-year-old, but he's now 24, But so that's how far back it goes. He was instructing when he was a high school player at Eastview with his family business, and now here he is, the Golden Gopher coach.
Yeah, it's obviously in his blood. And I think that 14 recognized that pretty early, because he became an assistant for that team. I think he was a grad assistant as well. Right. So there's guys that just are born to be coaches and born to run a program. I think that just with the landscape of how recruiting works now, between who you can see and when you can see them, and how much information is available on these guys, recruiting has changed. It's why we see so many guys from northern states leave to go play in southern states. Those southern teams don't have to come up here to see those guys. They can come up and watch a whole bunch of guys at one time. Recruiting has changed in that sense. And then obviously that with NIL money as well, that's become a factor. And so I think having a guy that's young, and this isn't to say that 14 wouldn't be willing to change or willing to do that, but like that is kind of more in tune with how things are changing. It's probably a good thing to have a guy that you could look at and be like, man, he's really young.
Yeah.
But that might be the right way to go about it. And I'm sure that when 14 took over in 1980 or 1981, whenever it was, they thought that he was too young. But he looked at it as, I've got an opportunity now to build this thing the way it's going to be in the future. Where Dick Siebert was, this is how we've done things for a long time. And you have the thing moving along. They had a lot of success, the same way that John did throughout 43, 44 years. But times change, things change, recruiting changes, all of those. And so you may have to adapt and adjust, and you may not want to. And so you have a guy that's younger, that grew up in a different time, that can maybe plot the future in a different manner. And I tell you what, with the recruits that he's got in so far, it seems like it's already paying dividends.
Yeah, he's had a bunch of guys on campus. I saw at one of the football games, he had a bunch of prospective students kind of, before the game, you get down on the sideline and make them feel special and all that. I also think that you mentioned, he was part of the family, this part of the family business and this instructional part. The club scene is such a big factor now in recruiting. To have a grasp on that the way he must, I would assume, having been part of it, so to speak, that's got to help. I talked to people, and everybody knows who he is. Like everybody at the club level, all these guys that run clubs, not just in Minnesota but around, know who he is. Not that they didn't know who 14 was. Obviously they did. But I think, too, that there's a different deal with that part of it.
Yeah, and like, so those things didn't even exist when I was in high school.
Right.
That was like Perfect Game was like maybe in its first couple of years.
Yep.
And it was like just in Iowa.
Yeah.
And so like with how much change there's been, I'm sure that John kept up with the change, but there's something about fresh, new, younger, the way that maybe Ty can relate to 16, 17, 18-year-olds now versus the way that John could. And then that's time does that. Mm-hmm. And I think that John realized that. I had conversations with him about how recruiting has changed. And I know there was some frustration with the way things have gone and how competitive it is, how hard it is to keep guys in state. And that's the foundation of recruiting in every sport. And that's Gopher football. That's Gopher basketball. If you can't keep the guys in your state, you're going to struggle, because then you're getting second tier, third tier, fourth tier guys from other states. So keeping those guys, wanting those kids to grow up, wanting to be a Gopher. So when Ty goes to whatever club team it may be, and those kids say, that's the Gopher baseball coach, I want to play for him. That is maybe the most important thing in recruiting, is having somebody that they say, I want to play for that guy. I want to be a part of that program. And I think that Ty, the development that he's done with pitchers, Max Meyer comes to mind, obviously, as the number one guy. I hope that he still is able to have enough time to factor into pitch development and pitcher development with the role that he's in now and the time that's going to take, because he certainly has an ability to develop pitching.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, what do you get to do now that it's your off season, so to speak? And by the way, I don't say this just because you've come on the Go Gopher podcast, but you are really good at your job. When you're on TV, we learn stuff every time. And you and I think, see the game clearer, because I'll say something and then I hear you say it and my wife will say, hey, or vice versa. And I'll say, he's exactly right. So that's probably why I like you, because I think you and I see the game similar. But you do a great job. So what do you get to do now? Do you go south for a while? Do you hang out here? Watch?
I appreciate your kind words, for one, and I tell you what, with Corey, I know he just tweeted out his kind of postseason wrap, and then he always ends it with educate, inform, and entertain. And I've taken that to heart. I think that's important. I know that we're there. I want to make him laugh. I want to make whoever I'm working with laugh, number one. I think that brings some levity to a broadcast. And then obviously informing people. I don't want to talk down to anybody, but I think that people are watching or listening to learn about what's going on. They want to hear a player's perspective. And so I appreciate that my goals are being seen by viewers and listeners. So that's good. I have a daughter in hockey, so I will not be going south. That's going to kick off here. What is it? So it's October 1st. So at the end of the month, tryouts. And so then high school hockey kicks in early November. So that'll consume most of our winter. So yeah, I tell you what, winters are tough because you get used to baseball. I've been in baseball my entire life. And so spring, summer, and into early fall is always consumed by baseball. And so those winter months in Minnesota get long, they get boring. I usually try to find a new hobby. And so it's like a lot of people have gotten into pickleball. So I'll play a lot of pickleball and then the evenings are hockey. So maybe try to get down to Florida and golf with some buddies a couple times, but it's I don't know if it's sad or it's just the state of my life, but I'm already looking forward to spring training. Yeah. I really am. Like, I can't wait for mid-February. Yeah. I know that spring is close and baseball season is close again, and that's kind of how my life is. Yeah. And I'm okay with that. I have no problem with my life revolving around my kids and my family in the winter, and then baseball in the summer. Yeah.
Well, hey, embrace your kids' activities. Mine are now out of college, and they're still around. I mean, we have them here. That's great. But those still are such fond memories watching your kids. My daughter was in mock trial in tennis, and son in baseball and coaching and all that stuff. So embrace those. Don't wish that time away. I'll tell you that.
I will not. My parents followed me everywhere in college. I don't know if they missed a start of mine in college, and they were at a lot of baseball games for the Twins when we were on the road. And so I certainly there's nothing I enjoy more than watching my kids play sports, and I hope that they get to play for a long time coming.
Yeah, very good. Well, hey, we appreciate you spending some time with us. Awesome insight on the Twins, on the Gophers, on 14, on broadcasting. Good luck watching hockey this winter. And I too, can't wait for spring training. I think this team has a chance, the Twins now talking, to regroup and be a factor next summer.
Hey, they're 0-0. It's a new season, and it started on Monday. But here we are. So already looking forward to it. And I appreciate you having me on, Mike.
All right, very good. There he is, Glen Perkins, former Gopher great. It's episode 141.
My thanks to former Gopher great Glen Perkins for sharing his baseball insights with us this week on the Go Gopher Podcast. His broadcast work is terrific, as you know, and you can tell what great knowledge he has, and we're grateful he shared a lot of that with us this week on the Go Gopher Podcast. Episode number 141 is presented by Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. If you're buying or selling a business, visit sunbeltminnesota.com or tnma.com today. We're also partnered with Affinity Plus Federal Credit Union, a locally member-owned full-service financial invested in you. You can learn more at affinityplus.org/GoGophers. affinityplus.org/GoGophers. Affinity Plus, banking for Minnesotans, with you from Pee-wees to the pros. And Cub is proud to support Gopher Athletics for over 2 decades and a proud sponsor of the Go Gopher Podcast with Mike Grimm. Cub, bigger savings on the items you love. Again, I'd invite you to listen to past podcasts, and please right now click that subscribe button to the Go Gopher Podcast. It's free to subscribe and free to listen at any time. And please be sure to share the link to the podcast with others so they can subscribe and listen as well. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please offer some positive feedback on your social media channels. We'll talk again next week.
Can you save when you shop Cub? Let's just say you might need a bigger cart. We've lowered prices so you save more. On Essential Every Day, it's easy to see the savings. Across the aisles, from pantry products to frozen foods to delicious dairy and more. Your family will love it, guaranteed, or your money back. Shop Cub and save today. My Cub, my way. See store for details.